Ladies and gentlemen, oozes and mind flayers, welcome to my guide to the world's greatest role-playing game, self-titled world's greatest role-playing game, Dungeons and Dragons. Have you always wanted to get into this amazing hobby, but just don't know where to begin? Or have you never heard of it or think it's for nerds? Well, if the last thing is the case, hurtful, but not inaccurate. If you want to play D&D, you'll need 5 things. Pens, paper, dice, friends, and this. This baby is the Player's Handbook, PHB for short. It contains the basic rules for playing the game and basic rules for character creation. Very important for anyone to have, aspiring DM or player. I recommend that every table of players basically has one of these at a minimum. There are of course online tools as well for looking things up, but I like the paper. If you're an aspiring DM, you'll need 2 other things as well. Again, these books can be found online anywhere. But I like the paper. This is the Monster Manual. It just contains a lot of stat blocks for you to throw at your players and kill them with. This is the Dungeon Master's Guide, the DMG. It contains just any tips for creating worlds, creating campaigns, how to plan encounters. Very handy thing. I love books, so I have these and a bunch of others. Now again, those 2 last books are not required if you're a player or even if you are a DM, having watched maybe some episodes of Critical Role, some other actual play podcasts or videos, you might just have the knowledge required to DM. Honestly, it's not that hard. If you know the basic rules, you can lead a game. Now, if you're an aspiring DM, this video may not apply to you. We are going to be looking at the PHB mostly today. I am planning on doing some other videos as well for DM specifically, maybe on campaign building or encounter building. But that will have to come later because DMing is... Honestly, those videos would probably take twice as long as this one is going to. DMing is complicated, it takes a lot of time and effort, but, you know, watching your players be happy is just the best. So I will probably make some other guides for DMs. Anyway, let's get started. Before you can even start to think about character creation or going on an adventure and diving into a dungeon, you will have to gather your real-life equipment. Pens, papers, dice, the book, your location, and of course your DM and players. Not sure if I'm okay with calling them equipment, but they are necessary for playing the game. Do you want to be a DM? Great! It was my mistake as well. Prepare for days of suffering as your party pushes the demon, disguised as a monkey, off of the sky ship and into the ocean. It is good fun. No, real talk, I love DMing. There's no greater feeling than like writing something down on paper and having it come to life. You know, having your players laugh and make jokes and then go on adventures in something you created and having a good time, you know. Guiding this adventure is an amazing feeling, and that's why I am a happy forever DM. If you don't want to be the DM, you're gonna have to find one, which is a bit more difficult. Again, it is a lot of work. Asking someone to put a lot of time and effort into something like that is a huge ask. So unless you have someone who is already kind of willing to do that, you might have to search around for a bit. If you are on your own and you don't have players or a DM to play the game with, you can always look online. There's enough like online games that are looking for groups in all kinds of communities. Honestly, just Google looking for D&D group. Go to Roll20. I think they have a good system for like finding groups and stuff. If you're gonna be a first-time DM, I recommend starting with a party of around 3 to 4 players, managing a party of 6 to 8, for example, like 6 how they do on Critical Role. I have a party of 6 players myself. It can be difficult sometimes to manage all of those people talking over each other, laughing, sometimes talking over you. But 3 to 4 players is a lot more manageable. I also think 3 to 4 is like the standard D&D party size. Of course, you can do 2 players. I have a campaign myself with 2 players, and I've even seen pre-written adventures like designed for 1 player in D&D. So anything is possible. It's just standardly and most easily for like new DMs. I think it's best if you look into gathering a party of 3 to 4 players. So, you found your players. You are or have found yourself a DM. Now, what do you need? Get some dice. You can roll online dice, of course. There are enough dice rollers out there. But there's no feeling like rolling that natural 20. The clickety-clack of the dice right in front of you. I am just, you know, here to sell you dice. Buy them. Do be careful. Once you start buying dice, it is very hard to stop buying dice because they look so nice, and then there's metal ones that cost so much more, and I should stop. If you're going to be playing at a physical table, I do recommend having at least one copy of the PHB, again, the Player's Handbook. It is just very easy to check in the book if you're like in need of remembering a rule. Something about spellcasting is always in there. Just show your wizard what spells he can get. I will put a link in the description as well for an amazing site, 5e.tools, which just has everything D&D for free. But there's something very nice about looking through a book, you know? It's just me, I'm a nerd. Besides the ones I've already mentioned, there are a bunch of other 5th edition D&D books. Tasha's Cauldron and Xanathar's Guide are, for example, very handy if you want more options for character creation. Tasha's Cauldron of Everything has an entirely new class, the Artificer. So looking through those books is very handy. There's a lot of books with special races, new monsters. There's of course pre-written adventures. So look through the immense library of Dungeons and Dragons books and pick what you like. Again, everything is available online, and in that link I will put down below. Maybe all of these separate books deserve their own videos, but just for now, get the PHB. If you're a DM, get the Monster Manual and the Dungeon Master's Guide. You'll be fine. You've got your people, you've got your books, and you've got your dice. The last thing you'll need are some pens and papers. Very specific papers, in fact. Time to make that dancing bard warlock. Character creation. To some, including myself, the most fun part of the game. Time to make another halfling barbarian named Jiggle Cheeks with the strength to push bears off cliffs and the intelligence of your mom. A 16 it turns out. Good job, your mom. Alright. To truly understand character creation, we're gonna need to go over this truly enormous sheet of paper. It's actually 3 sheets of paper, but we're gonna mainly be focusing on the first one. The second one doesn't really matter, and the third one is only relevant if you are a spellcaster, a wizard, or a sorcerer, or whatever. We'll talk about it all. It's gonna be good fun. This first sheet is what I call the core sheet. It contains most of the information you're gonna need throughout the game. But before we can start with these papers, we need an idea. Player race. The term that didn't age very well, but I don't know what else to call it. Species is a bit weird because that implies you can also play a bear. You could play a bear if your DM allows it and you figure out the stats. In any case, this basically determines what kind of mortal you play, what kind of humanoid. Do you want to be a human? Do you want to be an elf? Do you want to be a dwarf? Every race gets specific bonuses. So for example, a human is in canon very good at everything. Humans are very versatile, so they get a +1 in every stat. A dwarf only gets a +2 in constitution, but they are very sturdy and they are harder to poison, while an elf only gets a +2 in dexterity, but they get to live for like 700 years. Again, it's all in the Player's Handbook. If you want specific stats, I'm not going to go over everything, so read the Player's Handbook. They're all in there. I'll quickly go over the races in the Player's Handbook, just to give you an idea of what they are. Dwarves are tiny little men. They are known for being good craftsmen. Like you get a proficiency in any type of tool. You can be a brewer, you can be a mason, you can be a woodworker. Then you have the elves, the tall, pretty ones, your Orlando Blooms. They are very magical. They are harder to charm and put to sleep. They live to be 750 years old, and they are very light and dexterous. Halflings are your hobbits. They have this innate luck, allowing them to re-roll critical failures, and they are also quite nimble, allowing them to move through enemies with grace. Your humans, of course, the most quote-unquote boring of them. I like making humans. They seem to be the most boring, but sometimes a human can really just show your humanity in a setting. If you have all these elves and dwarves, it's sometimes really hard to feel this sense of relatability to all these adventures and magics that are happening. So playing a human, I quite like, personally. Dragonborn, ooh, these boys. They are special. They are quite rare in the D&D worlds, in the official worlds, and they are basically half dragons. They get this special attack, taking on an elemental damaging form. They can shoot fire breath or ice breath or acid breath, whatever type of dragon you are is the type of damage you do. Gnomes. I like gnomes. They're small as well, like dwarves and halflings, except they don't have the same abilities. They actually are considered quite smart, quite cunning. They have a advantage. They are better at rolling saving throws on intelligence and wisdom. They are kind of survivalists. They live in nature. Half elves. Your daddy was an elf and he decided to branch out, if you know what I'm saying. Your daddy will live to be 750. Your mommy will die at 80. Okay, that's not really a good description of half elves, but they are basically a mix between human and elf. They are good at a lot of things and they get some magical capacities, magical abilities. Half orcs. Ooh, I love me a half orc. They are sturdy. If they get down to 0 hit points, they can come back with just 1. They have this innate anger and an intimidation about them. You know? Basically, just imagine an orc from Lord of the Rings, but more human. They're half orcs. Tieflings are half demons. They have tail, they have horns, they have a link to the hells, they get innate fiery magical abilities, they get an ability to like shoot fire at someone if they get hit. They get a resistance to fire. Every single race has its own stats, right? And every race has its special minutia. Read through them. You'll understand them quite easily. Every race in the book is quite well explained, better than I just did anyway. And in the end, stats don't really matter. You always get the option to change your stats later throughout the game through leveling up. So just choose something that you think is cool, choose something that you think you will have fun with, because fun in the end is the most important thing in the entire game.
After race, we should look at backgrounds. Backgrounds are basically occupations. They are the minimum amount of backstory your character can have. A background gives you different bonuses depending on what it is. It gives you special equipment sometimes. It also can determine the amount of gold you have to start with, the amount of money. Backgrounds range from being a low-life criminal to being a priest to being a soldier. These are basically things you were before the adventure began, or right at the start, of course. They determine what your character is good at, their life experience. Speaking of backstory, write as much as you need. Do you really like getting into the nitty-gritty of creating a well-defined character? Do you want 40 pages of backstory? That's fine, write those. Give those to the DM, that's 40 pages of free plot points, plot hooks. Do you not really want to write 40 pages of backstory? That's also fine. Just make sure your character has some kind of goal, some drive, something in their life that they want. In my 2-player campaign I mentioned, one of my characters has an entire lineage, an entire family tree that they made for their noble family, whilst the other player just has the goal of wanting to be the most powerful necromancer in the world. These are 2 very different kinds of character building, but they work equally well as long as me, as a DM, is able to work with them. As long as your character has a reason to exist, it'll be fine. In the words of the great Brennan Lee Mulligan, if you have no goals or reason to exist, that's enlightenment. You've won the game. Then there is class. Arguably the most important thing about character creation. This will determine how you kill things, how you do, what you're best at, the magic you can wield, or the magic you can't wield. Let's get a quick overview of all the classes in the game. We'll go over them in alphabetical order. Please turn your handbooks to page 46, unless you're playing Artificer, which is in a different book. Artificers, you are a magical tinkerer. You make things, infuse them with magic, and have them do the fighting for you, you lazy Barbarians, you hit things hard, you're very angry. Barbarians get the ability to rage, allowing them to hit things very hard. Bards, you sing songs to inspire your allies, you cast spells to mock your enemies. You are pretty good at everything, not excellent at anything. You are pretty well known for being the talking your way out of sticky situations and into Dragon Caves class, if you know what I mean. Clerics, pray and slay. You get your magic from a divine entity. You pray to your god and they give you the ability to heal and harm. Clerics are known as the stereotypical healers, the white mages of D&D, but they are also pretty good at harming people. They are pretty strong. They have very hard-hitting magic. It's just that clerics are the only real healing class, so a lot of players tend to choose it for healing. But if you want to play a damaging cleric, go for it. Tempest Domain is cool. Druids, become a bear, talk to a sheep, eat some berries, make love to plants. Fighter. It's kind of an in-joke in the community that this class is pretty self-explanatory, but yeah, you fight good, you get special things to fight more. Monks, Buddhism, but you punch people instead of sitting under trees. Well, you can still sit under trees, but you also punch people. Paladins. You swore an oath to uphold a certain lifestyle and your conviction gives you magical powers. You can imbue your hits with magical energy called divine smites. Rangers. Now, I always thought of rangers as a bit of a combination between druids and fighters. You're good at fighting, but you also are good at survival, at nature. These are the Aragorn, Strider kinds of classes. You know, if you want to play the guy who is good at survival and good at messing a goblin up, go for a ranger. They're very fun. They also get the option to get an animal companion, which is just good, great. I like animals. Rogue. Jag be nimble, Jag be quick. Jag just stabbed you in the back, pickpocketing you while he did it. Sorcerer. Your daddy was a bard and now you have dragon blood in your veins, allowing you to cast spells. Sorcerers can do different things with their spells, making them special. Warlock, you made a deal with the sugar patron, and now they've given you access to magic. Make sure you do what they say, or there may be consequences. Wizards, you've studied a lot. You're the most at spells, but you're also quite squishy. Be careful. Now, let's look at the paper. This first sheet contains most of the information you'll need to know. Starting from the top, we have character name, character race, class, level, background, experience points, player name, and alignment. Oh god, I have to talk about alignment. If you've ever seen a meme like this, that's D&D. This chart basically represents your character's morality. I will go over every alignment as well, even though I really don't want to. So yeah, the alignment chart is split into 4 different quadrants. Good and evil, lawful, and chaotic. Good and evil are your standard, your character wants to do good or your character wants to do evil. Lawful and chaotic basically means, lawful means they hold themselves to a code, be that the law or be that a personal code, and chaotic just means they do whatever they want. Here's a brief overview of the alignment system, explained with a man named Jerry. Jerry today will be played by Robert Pattinson. Lawful good. Jerry does everything he can to uphold the law, be a good person, and he listens to authority figures. Neutral good. Jerry, he tries to follow the law, he's a good person, but he does bend the rules a little bit when it comes to helping others. Jerry will first get the law to agree with him before burning the local guards with a fireball. Chaotic good. Jerry is the Batman. Law is merely a suggestion as long as it stands in the way of good. Any rule can be broken. Lawful neutral. Jerry is no hero. He has his own things to worry about. He tries to be a good citizen, but he doesn't go out of his way to do any good. True neutral. Jerry is a leaf on the water. He cares not for law, neither does he care for lawlessness. He just goes with the flow, man, wherever the wind takes him. Chaotic neutral. Jerry's not a bad guy, just the other day he helped a lady cross the street. Granted, he picked her pockets while doing it, but later that day, he gave the money to an orphan. He then did a backflip because he felt like it. Lawful evil. Jerry has a plan to take over the city. He's bad, but he's not that bad. He has a code. He will never harm anyone who has never harmed another. He will just kill those who deserve it. Maybe burn down some buildings in the process, because that's how changes are made. He will then run for mayor, killing all of his competition because they're corrupt animals anyway. Neutral evil. Jerry stole a pouch of gold, then threw a rock at a window. He got arrested, paid his bail, and went out to do more. Chaotic evil. Jerry blew up a village because those people looked at him funny. He then kicked a dog because he felt like it. Again, alignment is a suggestion. It is used for people to start to get an idea of their character's morality if they're not very good at just coming up with one themselves. It is also used often in creature stat blocks to give the DM an idea how to roleplay the creatures. Alright, now we can move on to the real meat of character creation. Maths. We all like maths, don't we? So you see the big boxes on the left? Those are your big boy stats. They determine all the other stats. These are called abilities. Ability scores are the ones we are going to be determining now. There are a couple different methods of doing this. There's standard array. Standard array is an array of numbers, these ones, but to be specific, you get to order these however you want. Then there is point buy. You get a certain pool of points and you can put them in your points. You know? My favorite method is rolling dice. The way this works is you roll 4d6s and you drop the lowest number. Then you count those numbers up and you keep the score. You do that 5 more times until you have 6 points. Now, some DMs say when you do this method, you have to put the points in the stats in the order that you rolled them. I say, do whatever you want. It's fun. For example, I rolled a 2, a 5, a 4, and a 6. I dropped the 2, I add up the other numbers, and I put it into one of these smaller circles. After you've gotten the big numbers, you add the relevant bonuses of your character race, and there you are, you have your ability scores. Maybe I should explain what they are. They are kind of easy to understand, but nah. Let's do another montage, why don't we? Strength, punch and jump. Dexterity, shoot and sneak. Constitution, take hits, eat shits without getting the poison condition. Intelligence, knowledge. Wisdom, general awareness, wilderness survival. Charisma, that W Riz. Now that I've thoroughly dated this video, let's see what these numbers do. So basically every one of these large numbers corresponds to a smaller number that you get to add to your dice rolls. A 10 or an 11 is a 0, meaning that if you have to roll, for example, a strength check and you have a 10 in there, you get a +0. Going above 11, every time you hit an even number, your modifier increases by 1. Going under 10, every time you hit an uneven number, your modifier decreases by 1. Oh, and while you're rolling your stats, make sure that the total of your numbers is equal to or more than 70. If you do that, then you should have a fair score relative to the standard array. Alrighty, we have our big stats. Now we look at the small stats. These are skills. Usually you won't roll the big numbers unless the DM doesn't really know what else to roll for this certain thing you're doing. These skills under here are a lot more specific about certain types of actions you might want to do. Then we have above here as well, saving throws. You roll a saving throw when something happens to your character. For example, you might have to roll a strength check, a normal strength check, when you're trying to push something or lift something. You might have to roll a strength saving throw if someone is trying to push you. Certain classes get bonuses in certain saving throws, but not in certain checks. For example, a barbarian gets proficiency in Constitution and Strength, meaning they get to add their proficiency bonus to those rolls. You color the little dot there, and you add your proficiency bonus, which at level 1 starts at a +2 and goes up all the way to levels to +6. It's all explained on the class sheets as well in the book itself. There's a table with all of this information on it. So basically, right now, we'll start at a level 1 character, a +2. I am a barbarian. I get a +4 to my strength from my actual modifier. I get a +2 from my proficiency. So when someone asks me to roll a strength saving throw, I roll a dice and I add +6. That's a lot of math, but in the end, it does make sense once you get used to it. Looking at these other stats down here, again, same thing with proficiency. All of these stats correspond to a certain ability, and you add your proficiency modifier to the rolls of those skills if it is applicable. All right. That's pretty easy to comprehend. Maybe I talked a bit too fast, I don't know. First video, we'll see how it goes. If you have any questions, make sure to leave a comment because I am willing to explain everything and I will read all of your comments. Don't call me a stinky poo-poo head, please. So yeah, most of the game will be played like this. You say what you want to do to your DM will say, okay, you want to pickpocket this person? Roll a sleight of hand check. Sleight of hand, okay, you look at your numbers, you roll your d20, and there you go, you have your number. Big number is good, small number is bad. A 20 is a critical success. It usually means that that your action will automatically succeed. Not always though, if you're trying to, I don't know, wrestle a dragon, a natural 20 might not get you the result you want. Be reasonable. And a natural 1 is an automatic failure. Something bad might happen if you roll a critical failure. Now that's mostly for the role-playing sections of the game. The other half of the game is of course combat. Now before we get into combat stats, let's get the other stuff out of the way first. Now from the left of the page all the way to the right, we have these top 4 boxes. Personality traits, ideals, bonds, and flaws. These are mostly for role-playing. You add stuff in there to give your character some personality. These can be anything you want, but the player's handbook also has certain tables you can roll on to give your character some random personality if you're not that good at coming up with it. Again, nothing wrong with that. The book has options. Then here at the bottom is a really important one. It's also the biggest one. These are your features and traits. Specific races and classes get special things. For example, as I mentioned before, tieflings get a resistance to fire damage, natural resistance to fire damage. You would fill that in here. All of those special things, the abilities you have that don't really pertain to combat, stuff like passive abilities, they go in here, so you are reminded that you have them, so you can know that you have them and you can use them. Alright, middle time. We're going from top to bottom. Armor class determines how hard you are to hit. An enemy will roll a d20 on their attack, add their bonus, and if the number is equal to or higher than your armor class, they hit you. Armor class is determined by equipment. Initiative is basically your dexterity modifier, unless something else modifies that. It determines how quickly you can start combat. At the start of combat, the DM will ask everyone to roll initiative. Basically, everyone rolls their d20s, adds their initiative modifier, and that's how the order of combat will be. Movement speed determines how fast you can run in one round of combat. Movement speed is determined by your race, but can also be changed by equipping certain magic items, for example, or by class features. Current hit points. Alright, how tough are you? Your starting hit points at level 1 are determined by your hit dice. Hit dice are the die you roll to determine how much health you get per level up. For example, a barbarian, it says right here in the player's handbook, has a hit dice of 1d12. Now, for level 1, you take the maximum health you can roll on that die, so 12 for a barbarian, and you add your constitution, in my case, +2. So, my barbarian has 14 health. Every time you level up, you roll your hit dice and add that much plus your constitution to your maximum health. If you get hit at any point during combat, a DM rolls damage, and you reduce your current hit points by that amount. If you drop to 0, you go unconscious. I'll explain what dropping unconscious means later. Temporary hit points. Certain things like spells can give you an extra bit of health on top of your health. These are usually smaller pools, and once depleted, they cannot be healed. They are a fixed amount. If you receive more temporary hit points while you already have temporary hit points, those hit points will replace the others, so you can't stack them. Alright, now, what I said before about dropping to 0 HP, that is relevant here. Death saving throws. When a character drops to 0 HP, they go unconscious. They come right back whenever they are healed to above 0 HP, but while they are at 0 every round on their turn, they make a death saving throw, meaning they roll a d20. A 10 or above is a success. 3 successes and you stabilize. You don't get a health back, you are still unconscious, but you stabilize. Anything below a 10 is a failure. 3 failures and your character dies forever, unless revived by magic. Character death is something really important to Dungeons & Dragons. It adds stakes to combat. If you roll a critical success and natural 20 on a death saving throw, you come back with 1 HP. If you roll a critical failure on a death saving throw, you tick 2 failures. Getting hit at any point while you're down results in a failure. Getting a critical hit while you're down results in 2 failures. One last thing about taking damage and dying. If at any point an attack were to deal you so much damage that your hit points would go into the negative, equal to the negative version of your maximum health, you would die instantly. This has to happen in one attack, as if it doesn't happen in one attack, every time you go into the minus, you just come back to 0. For example, I have 14 health, someone hits me for 28 damage, I die instantly because I go into minus 14. If someone hits me for 27, I go into minus 13, I don't die, I just drop to 0, my health goes back to 0, and I am rolling for death saves. A character death in D&D is not rare, but it's also not supposed to be something common, of course. You can be saved from dying by getting healed at any point during your death saves, or if you do die, a Revivify spell is able to bring you back. There are even greater resurrection spells, but they are very hard to cast and very costly. Alrighty then, almost there. This middle box is all about combat. It is your weapons and the damage you can do. For example, I am a barbarian, I have a great axe. I write the name Great Axe here. I write my attack bonus next to it. An attack bonus is determined by the kind of weapon you're using and if you're proficient with that weapon. Melee weapons generally use your strength modifier. Ranged weapons use your dexterity modifier. There are melee weapons that have a little word in their description, finesse. That means you can also use your dexterity modifier if that is better than your strength modifier. Now, for my Great Axe, I use my strength, which is a +4. I am proficient in Great Axes, so I add a +2. My attack bonus is a +6. Every time I attack someone, I roll my d20, I add a +6, and if it's equal or greater than their AC, I hit. Easy as that. Damage is determined by the weapon as well. My Great Axe deals 1d12 slashing damage. It says it right here on the weapon, and I add a +4 for my strength modifier. Easy as that. You don't add your proficiency bonus to the damage. Any other damaging things like a Dragonborn's Dragon Breath or something you can write in here as well. it is mostly for weapons. And then at the very bottom we have these two boxes. These are your proficiencies, which are determined by your class, race, background, and then these are your equipment. You have your gold, your money here, and you have your other equipment right next to it. All right, last thing on the page, how do we get equipment? There are two different methods of getting equipment. The easiest is to look at your background and your class and just choose from the table. Barbarian, I get to choose, oh, this weapon or this weapon, these weapons or these weapons. My background determines how much gold I get. That's it. That's my equipment. The other method is to look at this table right here and roll, depending on your class, to calculate how much gold you have. Then you look at the entire list of equipment and you just buy what you want. I like doing this more, but it is just because I'm more experienced with the game and I know what I want. Finally, we can move on from this fucking page and get to the last bits of character creation. This second page is all about character building. It holds your treasures, your alliances, any organizations you know, your backstory. It has a bit of a description about your character, you know, your eye color, your height. That's it. Man, that's refreshing. All right, on to the last one. Home stretch, everyone. If you're not a spellcaster, you can zone out. This page is all about spells. I call it the spell page. Thanks for watching. Most classes get to learn and cast a certain amount of spells. That amount differs from class to class and increases every time you level up. It says how many your class can cast under the spellcasting section on every class page. For example, a cleric is able to cast spells equal to their wisdom modifier plus their cleric level, meaning, for example, a first level cleric with a wisdom of +4 is able to cast 5 spells, 1 + 5. Cleric also gets to learn 3 cantrips. Cantrips are special, we'll talk about it, they are here. Alright, that was a bunch of nonsense. Now let's actually write it down. Starting from the top, you have your spellcasting ability. This basically determines the bonuses you will add to your spells. Every spellcasting class has a different spellcasting ability. They are all under the spellcasting section, again, on the page itself. For example, a wizard gets to use their intelligence, a sorcerer their charisma. The spell attack bonus is basically what you add to any spell attacks, much like your attack bonus for regular weapons. It is equal to your spellcasting modifier plus your proficiency bonus. Your spell save DC is how high enemies or other people will have to roll to protect themselves from some of your spells. Certain spells have characters roll to resist some of the damage or resist some of the effects. This is equal to 8 plus your spellcasting modifier plus your proficiency bonus. Then we have cantrips. Cantrips are spells that don't cost anything to cast. You can do it as much as you want. You get a certain amount of cantrips and these rarely increase. Again, look at the table on the class sheet. It shows how many cantrips you can know. Other spells in D&D are called leveled spells. They each have a specific level. For example, sleep is a first level spell. It can put creatures to sleep. If I cast sleep at a higher level, I can put more creatures to sleep, for example. Casting a leveled spell requires you to expend a spell slot. How many spell slots you have is on the class table. Look at the class table. So I cast sleep at a first level. I remove one of my first level spell slots and I cast the spell. Easy as that. I can't cast a second level spell with a first level spell slot, but you can always use higher level spell slots to cast lower level spells. This doesn't mean you will always increase the power of the spell you cast. Certain spells just have a fixed power, but if using a higher spell slot is able to increase the spell's power, it always says it on the spell itself, if you read the description of it. Now, for some spellcasters, casting actual spells is a bit more complicated than just looking at your list and choosing a spell. Certain classes, such as wizards, have to prepare their spells. Again, read the spellcasting section. A wizard, for example, learns a certain number of spells at the beginning and then learns 2 more spells every time they level up. They don't have the cleric level plus wisdom modifier that clerics do. Wizards just learn a fixed amount of spells and then have to prepare some of those spells every day. So instead of having an amount of spells they know, they have an amount of spells they can prepare. Their intelligence modifier plus their wizard level shows how many spells they can have prepared. This can change every day. It is annoying.
I know it's a lot, but once you understand it, it becomes pretty straightforward. Spellcasting is one of D&D's greatest features. It allows people to twist reality into their favor. It allows you to cast great damaging magics, control the elements, control time itself, and it's just amazing to describe how the world changes around you with the spells you cast. For example, one of the last spells you can learn is Wish. a spell that just lets you do anything as long as the DM allows it. I'm thinking about doing a whole video on spells alone, just explaining what they do and which cool ones there are, maybe do it in a tier list format, but that's for later. Very, very lastly, I want to talk about a little thing called ritual casting. Certain spells have this thing called ritual casting, which basically means you can cast the spell without expending a spell slot after you have concentrated on it for like 15 minutes. It's just something so you can cast a spell during the day without having to expend your spell slots if you're not in a combat situation. Combat in D&D is fully turn-based. At the start of combat, everyone rolls initiative to determine who goes first, and then you just go down the turn order. When it's your turn in combat, you can do a certain number of things. Every character has what is called an action, a bonus action, a reaction, and their movement. Movement means every round you can move a distance equal to your movement speed, which for most races is 30 feet. If you're using a physical map, 30 feet is equal to 6 squares. Every square is 5 feet. An action is doing something big, like attacking, using an object, hiding, dodging, stuff like that. Different kinds of actions are explained in the player's handbook. Read them before you start playing. Usually I have bonus actions be used for drinking potions or jumping or pushing someone. There are a lot of classes as well that let you use bonus actions for different things, such as casting spells, or rogues, for example, can use their bonus actions to dash or hide at a certain point. Read your abilities. Reactions are a bit different. Reactions don't take place on your turn, they take place on your enemy's turn. For example, if an enemy is next to you and they were to run away from you without disengaging, you would be able to use your reaction to take an attack of opportunity on them, meaning you get to attack them once while they leave your threatened area. This can also happen to you, so be careful. Every time your turn starts, you regain your action, your reaction, your bonus action, and your movement. And then combat goes around and around until all enemies are dead, at which point combat ends. Well, combat can also end when certain enemies don't want to fight anymore, or run away, stuff like that, right? You can also run away if a combat encounter is too difficult for you. Don't think of this like a video game where every enemy has to die. Think of this like a real world where intimidating an enemy into surrendering is an option, or if you are in an encounter that you can't beat, don't just think, the door is closed behind me, I can't run. Run! Be a coward. It's fine. Lastly, we can talk about the two different kinds of combat there are, of course, and I'm talking in a purely mechanical sense. There is theater of the mind, which basically means you don't have a map. It means you think about where your enemies are, you imagine the scenario around you. This method heavily relies on the DM to tell you, oh, you are this far away from an enemy, you can cast this spell on them, you are in range. It also heavily depends on everyone else's ability to imagine their surroundings. Theater of the mind can be very nice if you want to describe more flowery scenes and not have just a piece of paper with some black and with some really badly drawn houses on them. It is able to evoke a much more epic scenarios sometimes, unless you pay like hundreds of dollars for expensive maps, which brings me to physical maps, allowing a more strategic way of doing combat. Players can look at the squares, they can look at things that are in front of them more accurately, they can see if all of the enemies are in a line when they want to cast a lightning bolt spell, stuff like that, right? Those are the two different kinds of combat. You say the things you want to do, you roll some dice when the DM asks for them. You have fun with your friends, you laugh, you make stories, you do things you'll remember. Honestly, that's it. Yeah, that's really it. If you have a character sheet and you know the things I just explained and maybe flip through the player's handbook as well, you basically have what you need to play this role-playing game. It might be hard at first, of course, to get into the swing of role-playing, but once you have that first in-joke, once you have that first moment at the table where everyone goes, yes, let's go, let's do it, then everything just kind of falls into place and you will have a lot of fun. That's mostly it, the basics anyway. Again, more videos explaining specific classes, spells, maybe some different books might be coming soon, depending on the time I have. Thanks already for watching. I very much appreciate it if you sat through this whole thing. It was a lot of fun to make. I like this new way of actually talking about things I like instead of just playing video games. I might still play video games, but I might not turn them into YouTube videos anymore. It'll depend. It'll really depend on what I feel like doing. That's the biggest thing right now. I am in a situation right now where I just want to do whatever I feel like doing, and, you know, we'll see where it goes from here. I have this very shoddy green screen. I have a very shoddy iPhone attached to my computer right now with Audacity open. That's how I'm recording this. I don't have professional equipment. We'll see how it goes. I'm very much enjoying this, so alright. It's been fun. I hope you enjoyed watching this, and I hope you all have a very, very, very lovely evening. Thank you.